When Neil Armstrong of Apollo 11 first set foot on the moon and said his famous line, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," he did that in the name of all humanity. And even though he's an American and NASA is a governmental institution, the whole world felt the joy and sense of achievement. But these achievements stopped with the end of the Apollo program back in 1972, with the last mission being Apollo 17. Ever since, no human has stepped on the moon for reasons both political and financial. Now the hope is restored again, with NASA planning on sending the first woman and the next man back to the moon by the year 2024, and then onward to Mars. And that's through NASA's new project, the Artemis Program, with help from US commercial companies and other countries as well. Before we get into the details of the program, let's first discuss the name. Artemis is the Greek goddess of the moon and sister twin to Apollo, and NASA chose her name to lead the new inclusive path towards the moon. NASA doesn't just want to go back to the moon now because it's trendy. There are clear and focused goals for why it is important to visit the moon at this time. Going to the moon in the 2020s will be so much different than going in the 60s and 70s, because this time NASA is going to the moon to stay. And that means astronauts will have to look for water and resources on the moon to use for long-duration missions for purposes such as drinking and cooling and producing rocket fuel. The second goal is for astronauts to learn how to live and work in habitats on a celestial body. In addition to sending humans to visit the lunar south pole of the moon for the first time ever, this unexplored face of the moon that contains ice and potentially other resources. But probably the most important far-sighted goal is Mars, because it is important to test new technologies and strategies in a relatively near environment where we have more control before taking it one step farther to Mars. You can think of it this way. If you want to win the World Cup, you must first practice regionally to gain more confidence and fix your mistakes before you go on and compete globally. Now, how exactly is NASA planning to return to the moon? Well, they have a couple of new fancy technologies to help them. The first is the Orion spacecraft, named after the winter constellation Orion or the Hunter. NASA is building this new spacecraft especially for the Artemis program to be able to carry astronauts to the moon and Mars and then back to Earth. The Orion spacecraft is planned to be tested sometime this year in the uncrewed mission Artemis 1, before it gets ready to be tested with astronauts on board. The Artemis 1 mission will last for a total of 3 weeks, during which the Orion spacecraft will reach the moon and stay in orbit for 6 days, 450,000 kilometers or 280,000 miles away from the Earth. This will allow mission control down on Earth to assess how the spacecraft works and performs and fix any issues if they were to appear. The Orion spacecraft also has a very powerful heat shield. During the journey back to Earth and while it enters Earth's atmosphere, Orion will sustain a temperature of 2,760 degrees Celsius, 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. If all goes well and Orion lands back safely on Earth, it should be ready to be tested with humans on board as part of the Artemis 2 mission planned for the year 2022. The second technology is the Gateway. This is a space station that will be orbiting the moon at a distance of almost 66,000 kilometers or 41,000 miles. That is 450,000 kilometers away from Earth or 280,000 miles. The Gateway will work as a stop station between the Earth and the Moon to give astronauts easier access to the lunar surface. It is an absolutely vital part of the Artemis program and is planned to be built in the 2020s, with the first element sent into space in the year 2022. You can think of the Gateway orbiting the Moon just like the International Space Station, ISS, orbiting Earth, where astronauts will also perform scientific experiments and get to know the lunar surface a little bit more. In addition to that, the Gateway is supposed to make contact with the Orion spacecraft and host the astronauts on board in preparation to land on the lunar surface. The Gateway will provide astronauts with life support and communication needed for the landing process. The Gateway also has several docking ports to be able to welcome cargo missions delivering science equipment in the future. and NASA has already granted SpaceX permission to be the first U.S. commercial company to deliver cargo to the Gateway. We should also mention that the Gateway will not only be an American effort, it will pretty much be a global collaboration just like the International Space Station. Many space agencies have planned to contribute to the building of the Gateway, like the European, Canadian, Japanese, and Russian space agencies. Huge dreams need huge rockets, and since no rocket in the spaceflight game is worthy enough of going back to the moon, NASA decided to build a brand new one, especially for the occasion. We're talking about the third technology, the Space Launch System rocket, or SLS for short. The SLS is a new rocket being developed by NASA engineers and other U.S. companies. It will be able to send the Orion spacecraft and the crew along with cargo to the moon in a single flight. It will be the only rocket who has the capabilities to deliver that much mass into space in a single trip. The SLS is going to be designed in order to be upgraded to different configurations, each configuration more powerful than the previous one. The first configuration, called Block 1, will be taller than the Statue of Liberty and more powerful than the Saturn V rocket. It will be able to deliver up to 26 metric tons of mass into space. The SLS Block 1 will be used in the Artemis 1 mission, when NASA is going to test the Orion spacecraft and the SLS rocket itself. The second SLS configuration is called Block 1B, and it will be able to deliver up to 37 metric tons of mass into space. The design of the SLS will evolve until it reaches Block 2 Cargo, which will have the power to deliver more than 45 metric tons of mass. The Space Launch System rocket will not only be reserved for missions going back to the moon, NASA also plans on using the rocket to put scientific missions into their paths to planets like Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. If you have been paying close attention, you would have noticed that all these new technologies being developed are sustainable and can be used for more than one spaceflight. And that's exactly the kind of spirit NASA is embracing while going back to the moon. NASA wants to make space accessible and affordable in the near future. And in order to achieve that, key components of space flights must be reused to cut the cost, exactly like what SpaceX is doing with its rocket, the Falcon 9. Following the same path, NASA is also redefining how it will launch rockets in the future, including the SLS rocket, and that's through the Exploration Ground Systems Program, EGS. The EGS program will upgrade the facilities required to launch rockets, to provide the opportunity for the facilities to be able to launch different kinds of rockets and serve different kinds of companies, governmental and commercial. Another vital part of the Artemis project are the suits. When the first woman and the next man walk on the moon in the future, they're going to walk in style. Forget the old inconvenient Apollo suits and welcome the new Artemis suits that NASA spacesuit engineers have designed specifically for the next journey to the moon. If you've seen clips of Apollo astronauts walking on the moon, you've probably come across several ones of astronauts having difficulty moving around and even falling over the lunar surface. And that's because the Apollo generation spacesuits were not exactly the most flexible regarding mobility, and astronauts had to bounce around the surface to be able to move. Additionally, picking up things from the surface or rotating the arms was difficult for astronauts because the suit's shoulders didn't have much mobility. With NASA's new spacewalk suit called Exploration Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or XEMU, all these issues are a thing of the past. The suit will customly fit each astronaut using the latest technology in anthropometry and biomechanics. The lower torso of the XEMU suit will give future astronauts the ability to rotate and bend, a luxury lost on Apollo suits. The XEMU will also be equipped to protect astronauts from being injured by the fine and glass-like grains on the moon's surface. Inside the current suit helmet, astronauts use a headset for communication between each other or between them and mission control back on Earth. This headset, which is more famously known as Snoopy caps, will be replaced in the XEMU by an array of wireless sensors and microphones to be activated when the astronaut speaks. NASA has also developed a suit for launch to the moon and re-entry back to Earth and called it the Orion Crew Survival System suit, to be worn by astronauts during flights to and from the moon on board the Orion spacecraft. The suit comes in a staggering pumpkin orange color in order for rescue groups to be able to identify the astronauts if they had an emergency and had to land in the ocean. The suit's number one concern is to protect astronauts during launch and re-entry, and it's basically a whole spacecraft for one with the ability to be fully operational for 6 days in case the astronauts had an emergency. The suit is fire resistant and has a cooling garment layer, as well as its gloves being compatible with the use of touchscreens. The suit size is also custom fit to better suit the astronaut. The two kinds of suits we mentioned are both meant for lunar missions, but NASA engineers say the suits can also be suitable for future Mars missions after performing some adjustments. Finally, the Artemis project is not only for NASA's inside engineers. You too can have a say in some of the design aspects and even participate in the design yourself. In June of this year, NASA announced the need for a new space toilet and wants you and the public to come up with a new design suitable for future astronauts on the moon. The design has to be lighter than space toilets being used now on the International Space Station to reduce the propellant used on launch. The Lunar Loo Challenge, as NASA named it, is open for both adults and kids aged 12 and under, with a prize of $35,000 shared between the top 3 winning designs. You can participate through the link in the description. If all went as planned without any delays because of the pandemic, the mission Artemis 3 will go on in the year 2024 to deliver the first woman and the next man to the moon. And after that, the missions are planned to continue on each year.